Diana Monroe froze at gate 27. She watched a man in a simple jacket quietly restore the collapsed flight routing system using just a borrowed terminal and a few quiet keystrokes. 15 years ago, she betrayed Ryan Bennett. She wrecked his tech career and revoked his license. She erased him from the aviation industry, while he raised his 5-year-old daughter completely alone. She spent years pretending he was gone. She convinced herself her ruthless choices were necessary. Yet tonight, inside a rain-soaked airport crumbling into technical chaos around her, Ryan stood perfectly calm and certain. And completely unmoved, he finally looked up. "You still remember gate 27, don't you?" Diana had no idea his dignity outweighed her sins. Ryan had not come for revenge. He was there to save the very CEO who destroyed him. "You and I are about to watch this storm hit Seattle-Tacoma on a dark November night built for reckoning." Heavy rain lashed in brutal slanted sheets against the terminal glass. Harsh wind howled across the tarmac, making the heavy boarding bridges shudder under the pressure. Inside, the concourse buzzed with that anxious energy. People suddenly realized the complex aviation software they blindly trusted was actually failing right before their eyes. Flight departure boards flickered. Gate agents grabbed their radios but only heard dead static. Somewhere deep inside the airport's secondary flight coordination network, a silent cascade error was rapidly devouring the routing system, destroying the exact data tables keeping international departures perfectly synchronized. Diana Monroe landed at Seattle-Tacoma on the final smooth flight before the massive tech disruption hit. She stepped off the jet bridge with the icy composure of a leader watched closely for 15 years. Now 45, she wore her age the same way she wore her expensive suits, with ruthless intention, without any warmth. Her assistant, Ella Brooks, fell into step, handing over the evening briefing. Tomorrow, Monroe Aerotech would launch its highly anticipated aviation coordination platform. At a massive tech summit drawing industry leaders from 11 different countries. But tonight, Diana just wanted a waiting car, a hotel suite, and the 8 hours of sleep she knew she'd never actually get. She marched straight through the busy terminal without glancing up. Just like truly powerful people do, when they're totally used to being recognized, yet still haven't decided if they actually enjoy the spotlight. Let's look closer. The disaster at Gate 27 began the way major software crashes almost always do, not with a loud explosion, but with a tiny silent glitch in a data stream nobody bothered to monitor. The airport's secondary flight coordination system, built to manage gate assignments and plane weight distribution for the overnight international flights, simply started spitting out broken network frequencies. 2 separate departure gates desperately fought over the exact same radio channel. A third gate completely stopped receiving vital ground data. A technician named Marcus Webb, 26 years old and barely 3 months into his new airport job, stared blindly at a monitor flashing red warnings, realizing one terrifying truth. A massive software bug had triggered, and nobody around him could explain it. His manager was yelling on the phone. The senior director was totally unreachable. The brief window to stop this virus before it infected the primary departure grid was slamming shut fast. Now stick with me here. Nobody noticed the quiet man and young woman sitting by the Gate 27 windows. He appeared to be somewhere in his mid-40s. Broad-shouldered, incredibly calm, wearing a worn canvas field jacket that had clearly been. His worn jacket had lost its shape completely. His 20-year-old daughter shared his dark eyes, quietly studying a textbook thick enough to stop doors. They arrived early for their overnight flight, exactly the way people who know life is unpredictable do. They were the only 2 at the gate. They sat completely at peace with the swirling chaos building around them. Watch with me as Ryan Bennett observes Marcus Webb's hands typing frantically. Ryan quietly studied the error code flashing across that secondary display. Setting down his coffee, the kind man didn't announce himself at all. He just walked over, speaking in the gentle, even tone of a man simply mentioning the afternoon weather. He noted the system was running on the wrong backup frequency cluster. The primary and secondary had traded handshake protocols during the recent software update. The true fix was a manual frequency rebind, not a complete system reboot. Marcus just stared at him. 2 more technicians, arriving from down the long corridor, openly stared at him too. With quiet dignity, Ryan asked to see the routing configuration. They quickly pulled it up. He pointed out one line on the frequency table, calmly explained the hidden truth in 3 sentences, and showed exactly what to fix. They made the change. The cascade error instantly stopped. The departure boards finally stabilized. Gate 27 lit up first, and the rest naturally followed in perfect sequence, like quiet street lamps recovering from a sudden power flicker. Future CEO Diana spotted the trouble from 30 yards out, walking over because this technology was her domain, and because her company name, Monroe Aerotech, was buried deep inside this very system's technical documents. She hadn't spent 15 long years carefully crafting an untouchable reputation for absolute composure, only to helplessly stand at a distance, while equipment bearing her company's fingerprints completely failed. She reached the workstation right as the monitors finally cleared. The technicians turned to the innocent man with deep gratitude, but his noble humility meant he was already stepping away, already reaching back for his coffee. Let's pause here. Diana saw his boarding pass beside his young daughter. She read the name printed there and all the air vanished. Ryan Bennett. The loud terminal, the overhead gate announcements, the heavy rain pounding on the glass. The hum of countless conversations faded out instantly, exactly how the world goes silent right before something shatters. The good man looked up, finding her guilty face without even having to search, as if he always knew exactly where the silent executive would be standing. "You still remember Gate 27, don't you?" he asked quietly. He didn't speak with bitter cruelty, nor did his voice carry any heavy grief. He spoke like a man who carried a buried truth for so long it became weightless, which is truly the most devastating way to deliver it. Let's go back 15 years before that rain. September in Chicago felt like a stubborn city completely refusing to accept that the warm summer days were over. Monroe Aerotech claimed 5 massive floors inside a shiny glass tower right near O'Hare. The building smelled of cold, recirculated air and ruthless, quiet ambition. The employees hiding inside had all learned to move quickly and speak with extreme caution. They never let their inner uncertainty show in a room packed with powerful superiors. But the innocent father never rushed, and he never guarded his words. Let's dig up this buried truth. He always fumbled through office politics. But he never once doubted computer systems. He read thick blocks of aviation navigation code the exact same way we recognize an old friend. Instantly, completely, never even needing to think about it. The guy didn't grow up with wealth. He clawed through a public university using scattered academic scholarships and a single government grant, hustled his way through 2 grueling regional airline internships, and landed his corporate tech gig entirely because of one brilliant diagnostic memo he handed in during a routine tech screening that was strictly meant to be quick. His boss bumped that report up 3 pay grades before noon. He was 29 years old, rotating the exact same 3 cheap dress shirts, but nobody reading his brilliant code analysis cared about his humble wardrobe. He was also raising a 5-year-old completely alone. His wife, Catherine, had passed from sudden heart failure 18 months prior, and Ryan dealt with that crushing loss like a massive system crash. He figured out what could be salvaged and rebuilt his life from scratch. Every single morning he woke little Madison, cooked breakfast, walked her to class, then drove to O'Hare Airport to do the tech job that paid the bills. And he never uttered a single word of complaint, because complaining meant needing an audience. And this kind, quiet man refused to put his private grief on display. Diana Monroe wasn't the famous corporate CEO quite yet. She was a 30-year-old executive vice president chasing the top job, constantly judged by a board of directors who saw her youth and gender as weaknesses to test daily. She was brilliant, hyper-focused, and ruthless, traits her aviation colleagues often dismissed as just being a cold person. But beneath that polished surface, pure, absolute fear. Terrified they would label her as incompetent. Afraid of those whispered boardroom chats that happened the second she walked out. Terrified one career-ending mistake was waiting just around the corner. She desperately needed a massive win. The board made that obvious the way you and I know executives do, through subtle, icy tones, through heavy silence, through carefully crafted corporate sentences that hid their true, brutal meaning entirely. The massive crisis that forced Diana and Ryan Into the same room was a $240 million aviation contract. A deal rapidly collapsing because of one broken data handshake deep inside the flight software interface. The outside vendor blamed Diana's integration team, and Monroe's developers pointed fingers right back. With 48 hours left on the clock, every single person cowered away from the blame. But Ryan locked himself inside the engineering lab until 2 in the morning. Grinding completely alone, sipping freezing coffee, staring at a giant circuit diagram taped to the plaster. And he actually found the hidden bug, buried 4 layers deep inside system logic. When Diana pushed through those doors at 6 in the morning, the system ran perfectly. The contract was saved. The lab was completely empty except for one solitary exhausted young father wearing his jacket and his sleeping daughter curled under the workstation, hugging a plush bear against her face. The future executive froze inside the doorway, watching silently for a long moment before Ryan noticed. See, real dignity never needs explaining. He quietly explained his little girl had a cold, daycare was closed, and he hadn't known what else to do. I stood there, staring at the repaired diagnostic display. Then I looked down at his sleeping child. "You saved the contract," I told him. Ryan humbly insisted he had just found a simple error. Right then, I finally realized I was looking at a deeply kind man who truly could not see his own incredible worth. You see, that's the rarest kind of soul, and the absolute most haunting to betray. The brilliant aviation software Ryan was quietly building. For 2 whole years it lived in his notes under the project name Skybridge. It completely fixed a massive software problem the entire aviation industry couldn't solve for 10 years. Commercial flight tracking software worked just fine under perfectly ideal conditions. But they fell completely apart the moment those clear skies failed. Whenever solar flares ruined GPS accuracy or overwhelmed ground stations caused heavy signal traffic jams. When a main navigation satellite simply went dark mid-flight. Standard airplane backup plans handled single-point failures. They were never built to survive cascading, multi-source system collapses. Those nightmare crashes seemed purely theoretical, until a plane over the ocean lost everything, and theory quickly turned into a terrifying reality. Skybridge was entirely dynamic. A genius rerouting framework that helped a blind navigation system reconstruct accurate flight path data from a scattered net of weak signal sources, gathering and seamlessly blending them in real time as main sensors failed. It was perfectly elegant, the exact way all truly beautiful engineering is. It made absolute chaos invisible by doing the hardest work completely quietly. Ryan kept the project a total secret for his first 18 months. He built it in the margins, late evenings after his daughter Madison slept, the hour right before his shift started, or on quiet weekends in their small apartment. He eventually brought it to me, because I was the only person at the entire company he actually trusted, and because, by then, the strict line between professional respect and something far less easily defined had deeply blurred in unspoken ways we never dared say aloud. We had worked late together 3 times, with little Madison soundly asleep on my office couch, talking about complex systems theory and the very specific loneliness of being a genuine genius in a room full of corporate suits who only half understood your work. Ryan finally showed me the Skybridge software on a quiet Thursday evening, drawing the entire architecture on my whiteboard like a nervous man, whispering a long rehearsed confession. I understood the breakthrough immediately. I also selfishly saw exactly what it meant for my career. Stick with me here. Owen Price grasped it too, though he found out through darker means. Owen was the chief operating officer back then, 51 years old, with a violently polished corporate smile and a ruthless mind always plotting 2 moves ahead. He hadn't built a single thing of technical value in his entire career. His only real talent was aggressively stealing credit, gathering influence, and swallowing other people's work. When Owen discovered the Skybridge project through a leaked report he was never supposed to see, he spent a full week weighing his selfish options, finally deciding that a good man like Ryan Bennett's continued presence at the company was a massive, accelerating threat to his own unearned power. Not because Ryan was greedy for power, but exactly because he wasn't. An ambitious engineer could be controlled, simply handed a title. Owen was given credit in press releases, kept just close enough to feel important. But Ryan didn't care about office politics. Owen began plotting quietly. He secretly rerouted our testing data, swapping Ryan's clean calibration results with corrupted software data, slipping in through a shared administrator account. He filed a fake safety audit using another colleague's name, flagging false risks about our performance margins. He sent 3 forged internal emails, designed to look exactly like Ryan's messages, sent straight to the board and our safety compliance chief, making it look like Ryan had lied about a simulated failure test we ran back in March. Then one afternoon he sat directly across from me in my office. He looked at me calmly and said, "You can care about someone, Diana, and still see they're becoming a massive liability. The real question is, which one can you afford?" I stayed perfectly silent. Owen had planted his seed of doubt and he knew it worked. Our massive Skybridge tech demo was locked in for early October, up in the 4th floor simulation lab. The entire board was watching, plus 2 outside safety certification teams. A high-level delegation from a major European airline considering a $300 million integration contract, plus 3 tech journalists, all brought in under strict embargo. Ryan arrived early. He had been grinding since 5 in the morning, running final validation checks with junior developers. Madison waited outside in the hallway, just sitting on a padded bench holding her stuffed bear and some apple juice she had on this little green dress she saved for important days. Ryan had told her what important days meant. You know the feeling. Days when the hard work you did in the dark finally shines. Owen strolled in last, like always. He leaned against the back wall nearest the exit, which definitely wasn't an accident. I stood near the very front of the room, looking exactly like someone hiding deep corporate anxiety behind a perfectly calm face. I only managed to look at Ryan once that morning. He smiled and nodded. I didn't nod back. He definitely noticed, but Ryan never wasted energy analyzing people. He only cared about optimizing his systems. The tech demonstration began at 9. Skybridge nailed the first 3 test runs, integrating multi-source signals flawlessly, handling staged primary failures perfectly, rerouting on its own during a simulated GPS blackout. I watched the junior engineers share a quick, relieved glance. But Ryan just stared at the main output panel, tracking the numbers, staring with the sharp focus of a man trained to spot dangerous anomalies. Then, during the 4th sequence, a glaring anomaly finally appeared. The simulated altitude suddenly dropped 40 meters off target. The navigation data drifted way outside our acceptable safety margins. The backup signal weighting was completely wrong. Let's be clear, not just subtly wrong, it was fundamentally broken, proving someone deliberately poisoned the raw input data. The energy in the room flatlined. 2 safety inspectors immediately leaned forward. One board member instantly grabbed her phone. Keeping his dignity entirely intact, Ryan simply said, "Stop the sequence." Looking back today, you and I can see he spoke with the quiet authority of a veteran pilot. He knew calm leadership during a system failure keeps things from spiraling completely out of control. He simply asked to see the source log files. He calmly told our team the aviation architecture was perfectly fine. The input data was flawed. He just needed 5 minutes with those original calibration files to prove his absolute innocence. But Owen coldly cut in before those 5 minutes were ever granted. He spoke with the fake, measured concern of a man pretending to be reluctant about this disaster, saying we had all seen enough, claiming the aerospace program failed a safety-critical sequence under strictly controlled test conditions, that the only responsible corporate move was to suspend the whole demonstration and run a full internal review. And Ryan would allegedly get his chance to explain the discrepancy through proper corporate channels. Owen delivered that entire lie without ever raising his voice. Diana stood up front. I sat among 15 silent faces, a future CEO doing absolutely nothing. Ryan simply looked at her across the simulation suite. He didn't beg and he didn't threaten. He spoke 4 quiet words like a dignified man who genuinely believed that reasonable people would always choose the truth if given the chance. Check the system log. He sounded exactly like a man with absolute faith in the data, yet holding only moderate faith in the terrified executives he was asking to check it. We both know he was right. Diana signed his suspension order at 9:47 that morning, while we cowards just sat and watched. It was one of those permanent choices made not out of strong conviction but pure cowardly fear. Owen handed her a convenient lie to survive. Ryan's honest truth was just too hard to defend. The corporate press office issued a statement that afternoon, claiming that a senior software engineer was suspended pending a full review of safety compliance protocols. The European airline quickly delayed its decision. Ryan packed 15 years of work into a cardboard box, grabbed his coat and walked out to his little girl. She studied his tired face and asked if something bad had happened. He kneeled down, gently wiped her eyes before any tears fell, and calmly said, "Not everything that falls apart is broken, Bug. Sometimes things just need a different kind of repair." Ryan never fought the unfair suspension publicly. He couldn't even call an attorney that first week. He didn't have $3,000 for a retainer. Madison needed warm winter boots, and a massive electricity bill had just arrived in the mail. He only made 3 phone calls the week after they ruined him. One to an old engineering buddy who completely ignored him. One to a legal clinic that claimed fighting massive aviation corporations was completely beyond their scope. And one to his mother in Portland who softly asked if he needed some cash. He said no, and they both knew exactly what that meant. His legal options completely vanished within a month. He was in the facility. He was the lead engineer on that system. The corporate communications team cleverly framed his firing as precautionary. It was technically accurate, like so many slick corporate PR statements are technically accurate. Precise in details, yet we know it buried the truth that actually mattered. Ryan's aviation career. His certification faced indefinite review during a cloudy internal investigation without any clear end, managed by a committee which conveniently included Owen Price. He quietly left Chicago that December. He loaded a rented minivan, settling little Madison in the back seat among trash bags stuffed with books and thick winter coats. He also packed pieces of an old disassembled oscilloscope. He just could not abandon it. They drove northwest for 2 days beneath flat gray skies, heading toward a new town where nobody knew his name. He found peace near Renton, 20 miles from Seattle, taking a small apartment above a hardware shop, breathing in the scent of sawdust and oil. Within 3 weeks, he secured honest work at a local airstrip. Their tower communication network had not seen proper maintenance in 4 long years. The manager paid a flat day rate, asking 0 questions. The system was dead, and Ryan had the clear talent to revive it. For honest trade work, that is almost always enough. From there, he moved to a charter helicopter maintenance crew. Then he arranged a maintenance contract with 3 private pilots who used a shared hangar out in Auburn. They simply needed a good man they could trust. You and I know it was not the empire he built, but it was honest, and he was present. He came home every single night smelling of hydraulic fluid and wire. Madison grew up seeing that her father possessed a profound ability to fix things, realizing true character outshines any corporate title. She never once heard him speak poorly of Diana Monroe. She never heard him utter a word about Owen Price. But observant children always sense the truth. She felt the heavy shape of the silence hiding those buried, stolen years. That something had deeply broken. Yet her father had chosen, in his own quiet, dignified way, never to let that betrayal define his entire future. At just 12 years old, she decided to study aerospace engineering. She told her kind father. He sat quietly for a moment, then finally smiled. "Good. You'll do it better than I did." She wrote those words on a simple card, keeping it right on her desk for the next 8 years. Let's examine Diana together. She became Monroe Aerotech's CEO the spring right after the tragic Skybridge incident. Owen Price conveniently snagged a spot on an advisory council. They retooled and relaunched Skybridge under a brand new name, falsely listing Owen as its primary architect. Diana silently signed the paperwork. She passed through Gate 27 at O'Hare the exact morning she accepted her shiny new title. Standing by the glass, she watched a jet push back below. Suddenly, the crushing weight of her betrayal hit her, a cruel choice she could never undo. But she cowardly shoved that heavy guilt into a dark mental corner, burying the ugly truth she refused to face. Over the 15 long years that followed, Diana Monroe gathered every hollow marker of massive professional success with the cold efficiency of someone using constant work to drown out moral questions she was still too terrified to ever ask. Monroe Aerotech aggressively expanded its global footprint. She led 3 massive acquisitions and completely restructured the safety division, and became one of commercial aviation's absolute most praised corporate executives. Magazines wrote glowing profiles, calling her steely, a true visionary, and completely uncompromising. She read every word and you and I recognize the hollow words corporate leaders used to find their soul inside a stack of achievements and fail completely. Diana remained unmarried. She had come close twice, though, but both times she pulled away, unable to explain the weight of her secret to the men she dated. The truth was, she always started seeing them far too clearly, and in their eyes she only saw the absence of a good man who once gave her his complete and uncritical trust. A kind single father she signed a corporate paper to ruin. It wasn't that she secretly loved Ryan Bennett for 15 years. It was the crushing reality of what she did to a decent person, a guilt she could never bury. Her assistant, Ella Brooks, spent 4 years learning to map the heavy, guilt-ridden terrain of Diana's quiet moments perfectly. Ella noticed Diana always walked the long way through Terminal C over at Seattle-Tacoma, burning 6 pointless minutes just to entirely avoid Gate 27. She also knew Diana spent every anniversary of the Skybridge disaster quietly staring at the original whistleblower incident file on her second monitor, reading every line, searching with the desperate look of someone hoping a buried truth might somehow rewrite an unjust past. That year, Monroe Aerotech began finalizing the massive Apex corridor platform, their most ambitious software project since Skybridge. For over 10 years, they built this new system on a hidden foundation that nobody in the entire company ever dared mention, because that foundation was Ryan Bennett's stolen Skybridge code, quietly buried deep inside Monroe's technical archive under a fake label. Owen engineered that cover-up. Let's watch how he positioned himself as the hero of Apex, just like he fronted the fraudulent original relaunch years ago, strutting through the corporate halls with the slick ease of a man completely unbothered by his own ugly lies. Diana missed the finer details of Owen's fraud, but she certainly felt the dark, heavy shape of it. The big tech conference in Seattle was meant for celebration. She had no clue a long-delayed moral reckoning was coming. The sudden software crash at Seattle-Tacoma right before the event wasn't a random, localized anomaly like Owen Price desperately tried to claim during the corporate fallout. It was the bitter result of the identical flawed logic buried deeply inside both Skybridge and Apex. A dangerous crack in the frequency protocol that careful Ryan had already found and safely patched years prior. A patch Owen's greedy team stripped out while butchering the codebase for their relaunch. They called the brilliant fix ugly. They ripped it away simply to make the software architecture look cleaner. The executive making that careless call possessed zero understanding of what the code actually protected. They rode their blind luck for 3 years without a single massive scandal breaking out. Until tonight, Ryan spotted the system error signature the absolute second he glanced at that screen. He wrote that original software himself. He recognized the face of the disaster instantly, exactly like you and I recognize our own distinct handwriting on a piece of paper we never expected to find. He just sat there in quiet dignity. Madison just watched him, saying absolutely nothing. You and I have probably seen this kind of stillness before. It was the quiet dignity of a father who had already made his decision. You know exactly what's wrong, she told him. It wasn't a question at all. He simply answered yes. She asked, "Are you going to help?" He murmured he was thinking about it. She gave him 90 seconds to think. It was all the tense situation allowed. Then she mentioned a medical transport flight flashing on the ground crew dispatch board. A young heart patient waiting for an urgent transfer to Seattle Children's. Their clearance was trapped in the disruption. Ryan stood up. He walked over to the busy workstation without announcing himself, invoking his painful history, or even explaining who he truly was. He just politely asked the young technician to show him the frequency assignment log. The young technician pulled it up. Ryan studied the screen for 30 seconds, then pointed right at the underlying conflict. He described the rebind sequence in plain English, telling the technician to make the change and watch the cascade clear. The technician hesitated. After all, this man was just a stranger in a canvas jacket. This was a critical system. But then there was something profound in Ryan's voice. It carried the quiet certainty of an honest man who spent 20 years being absolutely right about this kind of thing. The technician made the bold change. The heavy cascade cleared. Exactly 3 minutes later, that urgent medical transport received its ground clearance. The busy gate area had gone totally quiet in the way that crowded spaces go completely silent when something loud has suddenly stopped. The technical staff stood in a loose cluster near the main workstation. Marcus Webb tried expressing deep gratitude, but found no words equal to the moment, especially since Ryan had already stepped gracefully back. He was just looking for his coffee when Diana finally reached him. She had stood close enough to witness the entire sequence, watching his hands on the keyboard. The familiar grace of his movements, the way the room had naturally rearranged itself around his unshakable certainty. Let's pause here. In just a few seconds, Diana suddenly realized 3 separate things. First, that the massive system error was directly connected to Skybridge. Second, that Ryan had perfectly fixed it without anyone asking him to. And finally, she was staring at a man who spent 15 hard years building the kind of true authority that never requires a fancy title, because his dignity doesn't need anyone's validation to shine brightly and exist. "Ryan," she whispered, "I've been searching for you for 15 long years." He looked right at her. His expression held no anger, but it certainly lacked forgiveness too. It was something much heavier than either. The steady look of someone who has long stopped needing the apology they are finally being offered. "No," he quietly said, "you've been looking for absolution. I spent those 15 years keeping the lights on and getting my beautiful daughter to school on time." Madison was standing quietly about 12 feet away. She stared right at Diana with incredibly clear, steady eyes. Eyes holding the entire 15 years her noble father spent never breathing a word about what Diana had cowardly done. Diana met her gaze. You and I both know she couldn't look away because deep down she knew flinching would be far worse. That very night, Diana ordered Ella to pull the complete Skybridge incident file. In her hotel room at 11 p.m., with the major tech conference less than 14 hours away. And she strictly told Ella not to tell Owen. "Let's look closely," she repeated twice, rare for a quiet CEO. For 4 years, Ella kept the truth ready in a simple waiting folder. Not the corporate lies, but the raw, buried evidence. The unedited server logs, the access histories, the hidden metadata. Those critical memos sent to the board right before that massive demonstration. She isolated them exactly 6 months ago when she spotted the hidden lie in Apex. Platform records that completely contradicted the official story of the Skybridge project. She stayed silent until Diana was finally capable of facing her own guilt. They went through it together. The frequency logs from the very night of that doomed test showed malicious edits exactly 37 minutes before the sequence ever started. Edits traced to an admin account hidden right inside Owen Price's own department. But Ryan's personal logs, they proved he touched nothing for 12 hours before the launch. Those board memos were written by someone sitting at a terminal directly inside Owen's office suite. The fake safety report filed under a colleague's name was drafted in a tone completely unlike that colleague's. Usual emails and cited fake data completely missing from official testing records. And that core routing algorithm buried deep within its documentation as Owen's brilliant invention matched perfectly at the architecture level. The exact code Ryan sketched on her whiteboard 15 years prior. Ella presented this without judgment, because real integrity means showing the facts, even when it means delivering hard truths that should have been exposed earlier. Diana sat absorbing the shock for minutes. When she finally spoke, she just whispered, "How long have you known?" Ella quietly replied, 6 months, Diana nodded. She never demanded why Ella waited, because deep down she already knew. She lacked the courage to look, and Ella clearly saw her weakness. You and I both know this flaw, leaders who build unapproachable walls. Everyone around them quickly learns to bury the truth until the boss is finally ready to accept it. Diana silently added this tragic failure to her long list of mistakes. By dawn, she drove to a humble aviation repair shop out in Renton. The garage was a converted industrial workspace smelling of honest grease and fresh wire, which sharply reminded her of that sprawling corporate lab at 2 in the morning, 15 years ago. Ryan stood patiently, quietly fixing a torn-apart radio altimeter. His daughter Madison sat nearby, studying peacefully on her laptop. A scruffy rescue mutt slept soundly on a tarp near the door. Ryan looked up. He showed no anger, his quiet dignity always knew the truth would surface. She confessed everything that Ella had uncovered, reading the buried facts straight from the pages without excuses, and simply watched his face. Looking back, you wouldn't see vindication or relief on his face. It was the face of a man who knew the truth for 15 years. His quiet dignity no longer needed anyone else to confirm it. He then shared the steps he took during that first brutal month of his wrongful suspension. The desperate emails to the board returned completely undeliverable. The lawyer fees that priced his whistleblower defense out of reach. His one attempt to contact Diana through a former colleague, only to be told his request was flagged for review. He explained the risk register, an informal blacklist secretly maintained across the major aerospace carriers, and how that shadow record slammed every remaining professional door shut. Yet he spoke of this without bitterness. Just the steady, precise tone of a good man reporting on a broken corporate system. When he finished, he met her eyes and said, "I chose Madison over the fight. I would choose her again. I'm not telling you this to get your sympathy. I am telling you because you asked. And you finally deserve the truth." Diana had absolutely no defense left. She had exhausted it all reading the buried investigation files overnight. Meanwhile, Owen Price discovered the inquiry through a board member's assistant. A quiet Tuesday phone call triggered a sequence of rapid calculating adjustments, the kind of cover-up Owen was historically very good at executing. His first instinct was the narrative. Because you and I know corporate spin always beats the truth during a sudden crisis. He set up an urgent call with 3 key board members for Wednesday. He prepped a file painting Ryan Bennett as an unstable man, suspended for valid safety reasons, suddenly reappearing during a critical moment of maximum vulnerability for Monroe Aerotech, brought back by a CEO who shared a documented past relationship with him. Owen warned the board that Diana was acting on personal feelings instead of her legal fiduciary duties. He argued that rehabilitating Ryan Bennett at the Apex conference would open Monroe Aerotech to massive liability lawsuits, wreck the aerospace firm's insurance policies, and signal to global partners that the company's leadership was weakened by pure sentiment. He delivered these lies using that tone of reluctant concern, his most toxic corporate weapon. 2 anxious board members called Diana right after Owen finished pitching. They were polite but direct, questioning her timing, while dropping the phrase personal entanglement. Diana calmly listened to it all, thanked them for caring, and promised to take their corporate viewpoint into full account. Then she dialed a 3rd board member, someone completely off Owen's radar, and revealed the buried truth Ella had uncovered. This particular director had been at Monroe Aerotech for 11 years. She remembered technical facts clearly and utterly despised liars who tried to hide them. She listened quietly. She asked 2 questions. Then she said, "Bring Ryan to the conference." We can all guess who finally persuaded him, his daughter Madison. He initially declined Diana's offer, not out of spite but knowing that walking into the massive Apex conference, surrounded by the very industry that had falsely branded him, would create a massive media spectacle he simply didn't want or need. He built a quiet life in Renton, his honest work, his daughter, and those 8 pilots who always trusted him to keep their aircraft safe and honest. Real dignity never needs a stage. His daughter Madison sat across the kitchen table. "You always said the truth doesn't need to shout to matter. But a buried truth kept silent for too long just starts looking like a lie." Ryan stared down at his coffee for a long moment, then finally met her eyes. "Since when did you get so good at arguing?" She just smiled. She learned from him. The very next morning he called Diana and finally agreed. He'd attend as a technical advisor but on 3 firm conditions. First, his involvement must be documented in writing. Second, Madison's name stays completely out of all Monroe Aerotech corporate emails unless she explicitly approves. And third, if this corporate event felt like a cheap show instead of real accountability. He would walk out the door, and Diana wouldn't try to stop him. Diana agreed instantly. That quick yes told Ryan something incredibly important about her character. She wasn't just managing him anymore. At 45 years old, she was finally finding the honesty she should have had back at 30. Let's step inside Thursday morning. The Aviation Tech conference opened in a stunning glass-walled venue on the Seattle waterfront, looking right out over Puget Sound. It was a beautiful distraction, almost too pretty considering the grave aviation safety business happening inside. 400 delegates represented major airline carriers, aviation regulators, and engineering certification panels, plus wealthy investment firms backing the commercial aviation infrastructure. 12 journalists waited in the press section. Owen Price arrived early, planting himself right up front, dead center to the podium, acting exactly like a man who still thinks he owns the entire room just by sitting in it. He gave his scheduled speech during the morning session, pitching the Apex software platform with his usual slick fluency, bragging about technical milestones and safety validation records. The 15 long years of software development that finally brought their system to market. He only brought up Skybridge once, just a quick mention about early safety worries that forced a system rebuild. And he used the passive voice with the practiced skill of a guilty corporate boss who knows exactly how to make blame vanish into thin air, leaving no one accountable. Then right after lunch, Diana took the podium. She had written 3 separate drafts for this speech, only to throw every single one of them away overnight. What she delivered now wasn't some polished corporate version. It was simply the raw truth, spoken out loud exactly as she had finally found the courage to face it. She announced that Monroe Aerotech was fully prepared to release the complete technical files for the Skybridge software and the Apex architecture. She confessed an internal audit caught massive lies in the credit records for both aviation systems. She admitted that the one honest engineer who actually built the foundational architecture for Skybridge, the man whose brilliant coding was still beating inside every single system version deployed since that day, had never been credited or compensated, or acknowledged in any Monroe Aerotech records for 15 long years. Watch how this breaks. She told the room this was a deliberate cover-up the company completely failed to catch, investigate, or even fix. And one kind man silently carried those consequences. Truth brought forward at massive personal and professional cost. She spoke clearly. I signed the order that ended Ryan Bennett's career in this industry. I did it without looking at the evidence I was supposed to review. I was terrified of what that truth might cost me. I chose my own ambition over a good man's livelihood and name. I have no valid excuse for this. I can only confess it honestly and accept the heavy consequences that follow. You and I know that kind of silence. The room just froze, completely stunned by a confession no one ever expected to hear. Diana gave a nod and Ryan walked to the front. He didn't use any notes. He simply opened a log file on the main screen. An untouched log on an encrypted drive he had carried for 15 years, kept safe with the exact same quiet care he gave to everything that truly mattered. And he walked everyone through it. Every altered timestamp, every access account. He linked 3 old board memos straight to the computer records in Owen's private office. The exact structural match with Apex. The exact core algorithm and architecture he originally sketched on Diana's whiteboard back then. During a year when half the people in this room hadn't even joined the industry. He showed it all without drama, without anger, and absolutely no bitter words. He just calmly laid out a broken system, proving exactly how and why it failed. Owen finally stood up, offering 3 weak sentences that were barely even a defense. They were just excuses. But let's be honest, excuses only work if people still believe your lies. And that room was entirely done believing Owen. Then Ella stepped forward, holding another stack of files. Financial ledgers exposing every massive licensing fee Monroe Aerotech had milked from the Apex platform. The secret internal routing that funneled a cut of that money straight into Owen Price's pockets. And the damning emails. From 18 months back, where Owen fought hard to block a basic routine audit, claiming the Skybridge attribution check was just useless administrative overhead. The exact board member who forced Diana to bring Ryan to this conference stood up. From her third-row seat, her clear and commanding voice echoed out, stating she was demanding Owen Price be immediately suspended from his advisory role pending a complete external investigation. Owen walked out. Madison never actually intended to say anything. But she stood up. Years of watching her gentle father quietly absorb pain had finally broken. That silence could not hold her anymore. She spoke up. "My dad never once mentioned your name. He kept this poison out of our home. He just drove me to school daily. He was there for every single recital, every math competition, every terrible day, and every triumph. He built a life that was deeply honest. He never had to ruin someone else to succeed. I am not asking any of you to reward him. I'm just reminding you what kind of dignified man he is in case anyone forgot." Tears fell down Diana's face before Madison finished. She didn't hide them. Ryan calmly rested his hand on his brave daughter's shoulder. "You and I can learn from how he held what mattered, gently with quiet dignity." He said nothing. His quiet dignity spoke for itself. The formal resolution finally arrived over the following weeks. Legal teams, board reviews, and the independent auditor's report. Notes sent to regulators, the officially corrected attribution filings. Oh, and Price's consulting contract was rightfully torn up. They finally revised the Apex documentation to show Ryan actually built that foundational architecture. Monroe Aerotech's legal team officially filed the paperwork, pulling the innocent father's name off the risk register. It took way too long simply because that unfair register was run so informally, and nobody had ever built a system to fix mistakes. Ryan quietly accepted the back pay the company offered him, but he turned down the chief technology officer job entirely. Diana had offered it in person that Friday morning, looking out her office window, with Ella diplomatically making herself scarce. He calmly explained his Renton business relied on him. He had no desire to trade one toxic corporate machine for another one, even a much better decorated one. He did agree, however, to a formal partnership arrangement, carrying 3 totally non-negotiable conditions. First, Monroe Aerotech had to set up a fund backing. Honest engineers who faced stolen credit or silenced safety warnings. Second, the company needed a protected whistleblower pathway with outside eyes. And finally, the true Skybridge authorship record must go public in the main technical registry. Not some quick press release, but a permanent fix to the official professional record. Diana agreed to all 3 demands. She spent 18 months building them out, ensuring they outlived her own time there. Let's be honest, she knew this was the only real path to justice. Not a quick fix to clear her own name, but permanent changes built right into the company she had once allowed to fail so completely. Diana asked to meet him at the airport the day he was flying home. He agreed simply because she asked him straight up, and he had decided with that steady grace of his that honest questions deserved honest answers. They met up at Gate 27. The terminal was quiet that Thursday afternoon. A simple domestic flight. Half-full departure in 40 minutes. Ryan waited in the exact same type of chair he sat in the night everything fell apart. Diana sat across from him. This time there was absolutely no chaos between them, meaning there was nowhere left to hide from the hard truth that needed saying. Diana spoke up first. She admitted how terrified she felt the night of that Skybridge demonstration. Scared of the board, losing the contract, and looking completely incompetent to everyone. Crushed under 2 years of people whispering that she was only a temporary conditional hire. Never quite good enough for the room she entered. She confessed Owen gave her a lie to survive, and she cowardly took it. The tragic reality that it ruined an innocent man just wasn't enough to stop her. She admitted she spent 15 years climbing a corporate ladder, only to realize her whole career had a false bottom. You and I can imagine the shame every time she signed technical documents or ran meetings. The crowd had no idea this powerful CEO hid such a buried truth. Her conscience shifted, much like the weak floorboards in an aging building. You and I know her success was built on a cowardly silence. She wasn't demanding anything from the single father. At 45, she attempted the honesty she owed him when he was falsely accused at 30. She knew a decade and a half of injustice couldn't be erased, only openly acknowledged. Ryan just listened. His quiet dignity had never faded. He absorbed her confession with the profound grace of a kind man who weighs every word carefully. When she finally stopped speaking, he didn't show any hatred. He admitted that losing everything to false accusations kept him trapped in pure anger for 2 years, exhausting him like a wildfire, with absolutely nothing left to consume. He explained that his surviving dignity didn't mean he simply erased her cowardly betrayal. It was more of a conscious choice, a firm decision that his remaining future wouldn't be defined by the injustice behind him, ensuring that his precious little girl would grow up with a devoted single dad in a home filled with genuine truth, zero toxic bitterness. Let's be clear, he wasn't saying this to comfort her, but because the buried truth was finally out, and his honorable nature demanded nothing less back. He let the false charges go. It took incredible strength, but his soul was free. His daughter Madison arrived 20 minutes before boarding, offering total silence when she spotted Diana. Yet she gave a calm, steady nod, showing the exact same shining grace as her father. Starting fresh right there, without ignoring the painful 15 years of silence between them. The CEO nodded back, the departure screens refreshed. The outbound flight remained perfectly scheduled. Ryan glanced at the glowing monitor, looked right at his old colleague, and spoke. Some flights get delayed 15 years, but if they land safe, they still count. The single father grabbed his bag. Madison rose. Father and daughter strolled toward the tunnel, entirely unbothered, moving with the quiet, unbroken dignity of good people who know exactly where they belong. Diana just watched them leave. So we leave her standing alone at gate 27, right where this dark secret had started, and finally let it end.